Oh, yes, power rankings. So, for people who've been wondering, so what has Shannon been doing with the power rankings board since March? I really haven't made many changes to it. But during the playoffs, as each round finished, I would update the power rankings as needed. I made power rankings changes during the season. Now, these are the power rankings headed into the draft. Tampa Bay's at number 1, Dallas is at number 2 because Stanley Cup winner, Stanley Cup finalist. I'm not changing that. These are the final power rankings for 2019-2020. And of course, I've got Seattle down here at 32 because I made a Seattle magnet. I thought, you know what? I need Seattle to be on here. I also got some decals for Seattle. I've got some nice big logos. I'm already, after free agency happens, to start going over what Seattle might get when they commit to the NHL and what kind of protected lists we're going to be looking at and all that wonderful stuff. So I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but it means that during next season, providing we have a next season, and I'm hoping we do, Seattle may move up the power rankings just by virtue of not being a team and not losing, and the teams are playing so poorly that I put Seattle ahead of them. I don't have a magnet with the number 32, so I drew that by hand on there, but I thought it was fun. And then here we've got a change I've made to the board. So every year I try to change how I do the power rankings. This still says NHL standings. I don't know that I'm going to do NHL standings as being part of the power rankings board, although I did like to have the power rankings there with the NHL standings, but I think I may just do their last 10 record and something along those lines. But I'll change it up. And then with the teams here, again, I'll be changing things up for next season. So I'm all set. And I did start, revamping this board. I want to say at the start of the playoffs, I started making the minor changes to it. But yeah, so here's to hoping. I will be doing another power rankings after we have gone through the draft and after we have gone through free agency. So not both, but after free agency's done and we've got the draft and we know what teams are going to have what players, I'll be doing a power rankings then. All right, you set? Okay. Everybody else just going to skip to the end and they're going to argue about it. Number 31 on the board is Detroit. And Detroit, losing the draft lottery doesn't necessarily help their case, but having Steve Yzerman at the helm does. He will pick up draft picks, he will use those draft picks, and odds are he'll use them well. Sider could very well be on this team next year, depending on who they draft at 4. That may be another prospect being added to the lineup next year, and there's going to be changes made. So I'm anticipating Detroit being better. I don't think they'll be the worst team in the league back-to-back years. That doesn't normally happen. A good example of that is we kind of thought Ottawa would probably be the worst team this year, but they weren't. At number 30, and this team has been all over the place, and it's Buffalo. Now I'm hoping, and again, I have not changed where Buffalo is on the standings, or on this board, based on what Kevin Adams has done, because I want to see kind of the final picture. It's sort of like trying to grade an artist when they've just started their first. Now, when Bob Ross is doing a painting, and you go, yeah, that's great, ruined it. Oh, no, that made it its best feature. So that's the thing. I'm not going to grade Kevin Adams on the Bob Ross scale when it looks like ruined it, and when he probably didn't. So Buffalo's at 30, but I do anticipate them being better next year. They better be. Number 29, San Jose. Going to be interesting to watch and see what they do in the offseason because the pressure for a bounce back year is there for Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson, whether he's a good GM or a bad GM, we may find out this offseason. For people who want to say he's not a good GM, what happens with San Jose from here could tell us. So if they bring in Dubnyk, they bring in Donato, they let Dell go, and if they make other surface changes and go, okay, we're going to keep everything basically the same, we think we can bounce back, it could absolutely backfire. Or he looks like a genius. Number 28, not in the bottom row, Ottawa. Ottawa's going to be moving up this list. They have to. They have cap space. They have the number 3 draft pick. They have the number 5 draft pick. Based on how they ended their season in March, I still have them at 28th. But I think they're in good shape. And I think that this is a team that should start making that climb this coming season. I still don't see them as a playoff team, but they should start making that climb back to respectability. Number 27, Anaheim. Anaheim, they have young prospects coming in. You got Zegras coming in. You've got other players ready to make that jump. You may have a good year from Steele as well. I think Steele's on the verge of, having that scoring breakthrough. So Anaheim, things are definitely, I think, in a situation where the worst is probably behind them. I think this year was probably the worst we're going to see for them. And I think it's going to get better. So Anaheim, I have a 27th. 26th, New Jersey. So one of the last teams that wasn't in the bubble. Now, New Jersey was much higher the last time I did a power rankings with them in it. But again, when they started the return, I said, okay, any team that isn't participating in the return drops down to the bottom 7. Because they're not playing, I'll drop them down to the bottom 7. New Jersey had a very good run towards the end of the year. With the right moves, they can absolutely get into contention next year for a playoff spot. I'm not going to say contender. Although Tom Fitzgerald believes that if Hischier and Hughes make that next step, then they'll be a much, much better team. And I can't argue against that. Jack Hughes, I thought, had a decent rookie year. He didn't have any puck luck, and people are jumping on him because it's the easiest thing to do with a top draft pick is just jump on him when he has a poor season statistically. But watch out for them next year. They're going to be interesting to watch. The last team on the board that didn't play in the return that's on the board is the LA Kings. The Kings, honestly, played really, really well before the pause. And one of the reasons why I think we got 24-team tournament instead of the rumored it could be 31 teams is because a team like LA, I think, could have gone on a bit of a run. Now, they eventually would have got taken out by a team like Vegas or, maybe one of the other top seeds like Colorado, these guys here. But they absolutely could have won a best-of-3 play-in round. I believe in Peterson, their goaltender. I know Jonathan Quick's still there. He probably would have played in a return, but I think Peterson would have probably snagged the net from him. And I think they're in pretty good shape going forward. Velarde finally made his debut and looked pretty good. 7 points in 10 games. I think LA is a dark horse. Not necessarily for a playoff spot, but of the 3 California teams, I have them ranked the highest. And at the time of the pause, I had them up to 18th or 17th on the power rankings? Yeah, it was hard to put them down to 25th because I didn't believe it. So now we're into teams that played in the return. At number 24, they didn't win a game, and it's the Rangers. Now, the Rangers, again, this is one of those situations where I believe the Rangers are going to move up. The Rangers are 24th on the board because in the return, they didn't generate a win, and they didn't generate a win against a Carolina team that didn't get out of round 1 either. So, losing the play-in hurt the Rangers, and of course now, Lundqvist being bought out, and they're going to go with Georgiev and Shesterkin next year. I think things are going to go well for the Rangers next season, but again, based on their play in the return, I have them at 24th. At 23, also struggling in the return, is Florida. Now, there are Florida Panther fans out there who think that I'm really, really hard on Florida, and I have been, because they keep finding ways to screw it up. They go out, they get Bobrovsky, they've brought in Hoffman, they bring in all these guys, there's a lot of optimism, and then it just all falls apart. And now in the offseason, things could get uglier. But the way they played against the Islanders, I don't know, they just don't have whatever it is that gets you to that next level. They just don't seem to have it. So for Florida, I hope to be wrong, but to me, it just looks like they're spinning their wheels. We'll see if a new general manager at the helm, a new voice, new face, deciding on what goes on, maybe that'll change things for them. Number 22, surprised that Pittsburgh is down this low. But again, they lost the play-in round, and they were kind of listless at points against Montreal. I'm not sure going forward. Okay, so are they going to get back into contention? I don't think so. I think that their peak was likely 2016 and 2017. Back-to-back cups, great. But the lack of top-notch prospects, the depth issues the teams had at times, and that blue line, it just feels like, things are going to change, and I don't know that Pittsburgh's necessarily going to stay in the running. And again, this is going to be teams that lost the play-in round. Next on the board at 21, Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, Vancouver takes them out in 4. I thought Minnesota played better than what you would think by reading media reports right now and everything being all torn apart. But I get it, because they lost to Vancouver, because it's another setback for Minnesota. This kind of gives Bill Guerin free rein to do whatever he wants. And maybe it's better for Guerin that they lost the play-in round, because now, yeah, he can do whatever he wants with the team. I'm just gonna burn it to the ground then, because this didn't work. And again, for Minnesota fans, you want a Stanley Cup. You don't want to just be building a team that's middling or goes out in the first round. You want a Stanley Cup. So hopefully Bill Guerin, that's the plan, is to build the team up to a Stanley Cup and not just middle of the pack and out in round 1 or 2 again. So we'll see what happens with Minnesota. Number 20, Winnipeg. Knocked out by Calgary, and it didn't help that they lost 2 of their best players immediately in that series. I'm sure that for Winnipeg fans, that left a bad taste in their mouth for a while. I would imagine that's passed by now. We're into October. That was in August. It hasn't passed by now. Okay. So Winnipeg, though, for me, with the amount of cap space they have, and with Hellebuck in net, and with the scoring they have, all they have to do is take that cap space, weaponize it, and figure out their defense. And I think they go right back into contention. And maybe I'm a fool for saying it. I'm the fool that keeps picking Florida to make the playoffs. Not probably going to do that this year. But for Winnipeg, I don't think they're that far off. I think they have all the talent in the world. I think they need a little more depth. I think they need that blue line, changed around a bit. But as long as you got Hellebuck in net and you've got a guy like Scheifele up front, and Scheifele's injury absolutely kneecapped them against Calgary. So, I have them in 20th, but I would not be surprised if during next regular season they end up in the top row a lot. Number 19, surprisingly, Edmonton misses out on the playoffs. Now, Puljujarvi may very well be coming back. That should help if he does nearly as well in the NHL as he's been doing in Europe since he left. Then it's great news. We'll see. For the Oilers, though, tremendous disappointment losing against Chicago in a year where it felt like almost anybody could win, and then of course Tampa wins because that's sort of how that works. But the Oilers, I do think are close. But what sunk them was that blue line. That blue line looked passive against Chicago. And it was way too easy for Chicago to pass it around in the slot. Way too easy for them to get Oiler players to screen their own goaltender. And there were a lot of goals that went in that I don't think I could blame Smith for. I don't think I could blame Koskinen either. And they've got to change that. So we'll see what happens with the Oilers next season. Number 18, Nashville. Nashville's in a tough spot now. So they lose the play-in round against the Coyotes. And they're on paper, they're still a good team. And that blue line's going to keep them in games. And Saros is going to be a decent goaltender. But there's tremendous concern, I would think, if you're Nashville, because you don't have cap space to really make big improvements. And you want big improvements if you're Nashville. So for the Predators, it feels like they're slipping, much like Winnipeg. A couple years ago, they were the powerhouses of the Central Division, and now it feels like they're both on the decline. The difference being Winnipeg has cap space to fix it, Nashville doesn't. Winnipeg has some really good young players. Nashville tends to have older players in its core. So we will see how that turns out for Nashville. Number 17, the last of the teams that lost the play-in round, and that's Toronto. Certainly the pitchforks come out whenever Toronto loses a round, whenever Toronto has struggles. Columbus played really, really well. Columbus's goaltending was fantastic. I think it's bizarre to me that Freddie Anderson takes the amount of blame that he does, because I think Freddie Anderson's an excellent goaltender for Toronto. And to me, there hasn't been a series where I've thought they would have won that if it wasn't for Freddie. So I get it. I do. It's been 4 years now, and the desire for change is going to be strong with Toronto, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think Anderson's good, and I think the goaltenders that are available right now, I have a hard time thinking of a goaltender who's available right now other than maybe Markstrom, who would be an upgrade over Freddie. And even with Markstrom, you're going to have to pay him big money for term, and Markstrom has shown over a year and a half, the last year and a half in Vancouver, he can be excellent, but he's 30 years of age. And so you do have some concerns that maybe he'll be really good in Vancouver. He might struggle somewhere else. And you have to look at his whole body of work throughout his career and realize you've already got your starter in Freddie. It's bizarre. If they decide to move him, there will be plenty of suitors. Number 16. So the lowest now of the 16 teams that reached the playoff round one. And I have Arizona. The Coyotes, of course, knocked out Nashville. Finally, looked like Arizona was going to be relevant. And then Colorado laughed and said no. Darcy Kemper gutted out one win for them, but that's as close as Arizona got. And so now if you're the Coyotes, and now you've got a new GM in Bill Armstrong who's trying to change things and make it all better, I do wonder how he's going to get that done. They don't have cap space. Today, as I'm recording this, they've bought out. They've got Grabner on waivers for the purpose of a buyout. And so for Arizona, it's going to be interesting to see how you fix this. And if Taylor Hall is still part of the equation. Because Hall, if they overpay him, then that just makes it worse. That's just going to make it that much more difficult for them to get back into the hunt. So Arizona's going to be one to watch. Number 15, Chicago. Chicago, they got run over by Vegas. Crawford got them a win. But the general picture in Chicago is still going to be one of how does this work going forward. The good news for the Hawks is Kirby Dach absolutely had a sensational run for Chicago and is emerging as a top two center. And so with Taves and Dach down the middle, they're set for next year at the very least. But there are some concerns with Chicago going forward. There really are. And so we'll see what happens with the Blackhawks and, whether or not Chicago's getting closer to playoffs or if that upset over Edmonton was just sort of a one-off. I lean towards one-off, but we'll see. Number 14, and I did not anticipate this team being the first team in the second row, but it's the Caps. The Capitals, again, first round of the playoffs, and we can have the debate over whether or not they wanted to be there, what kind of effort there was, but the reality is this is back-to-back years now they've lost in round one. And that's problematic. They won the Stanley Cup in 2018, but this is a team that outside of that cup win, there's been a lot of disappointment. There's been a lot of being close. A lot of pretty good regular season team. Postseason, not as much. And so that reputation is sort of back. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the offseason. Because remember, they're trying to convince Ovi to stick around as well beyond this coming season. And whatever happens with this upcoming season could be absolutely huge for Alex Ovechkin. So we'll see. Number 13, Columbus. The Blue Jackets have finally become a team that year in and year out wins. And the impressive thing this year was that with Korpisalo and with Merzlikins, they showed these guys are NHL level goaltenders. Great news for Columbus because when Bobrovsky left, things looked kind of dark. And things look kind of dark with Panarin gone and Duchesne gone and Dzingel didn't stick around. And yeah, but Columbus, they've carved out a reputation as one of the hardest working teams in the league. They gutted out the win over Toronto, and then they lost to a Tampa Bay team that nobody was going to stop. So no shame in that. And for Columbus, I have them at 13. At 12, Montreal. Now, I do not anticipate Montreal necessarily being at 12 during any given regular season, but they played pretty well. And they pushed the Flyers. And Nick Suzuki, absolutely one of the best two-way forwards in the game, according to that playoff run. And we'll see how he follows it up, because he's raised the bar for himself pretty high. And so, if I'm Montreal, I'm pretty satisfied with the play of Nick Suzuki, and I'm pretty optimistic with Romanov coming in. Caulfield's a year away, but the future looks pretty bright for Montreal. And Kotkaniemi came in and showed that he's actually going to be a player, which I never really lost faith. But again, in this day of 24/7 news and 24/7 sports, it's easy to jump on a bandwagon of putting down a prospect or saying, this guy's cold, he's done, he's finished, or vice versa. This guy's the greatest player in the history of the game, and then it was one game. But again, Montreal, I think they can sustain this. I did like the addition of Jake Allen. Again, I did not move any of these teams on this board based on any trades they've made since they got eliminated from the playoffs, but I like what Montreal's doing. I do. Number 11, Carolina. So for Carolina, for me, the depth is there. I love their blue line. I think their young forwards are excellent. I do have concern about whether or not they have the starting goaltender they need to go to a Stanley Cup. Right now with Carolina, you've got that young core. You've got a pretty exciting young team. You have to start thinking they can go on a cup run. And, 2020, 2021 looks pretty wide open right now. We'll see coming out of free agency and out of the draft and everything how all these teams look. But it looks pretty wide open. And so why not Carolina is kind of the way I'm looking at it. Why not see the bunch of jerks holding up a Stanley Cup in 2021? Because why not? But I do wonder about whether or not Mrazek or Reimer is the guy to get it done. So you guys can let me know in the comment section below whether you agree or disagree. And I know there's people who disagree and there's people who agree. Number 10, and Calgary's going to need to do some work in the offseason as well. Calgary's issues are, the goaltending did falter against Dallas. And it was just crazy that there were at least two different opportunities where Calgary really could have stomped on Dallas. And both times, nope. And so that's something that needs to be addressed. I do think that something's going to change up with the core. But I think that the preoccupation right now with the defense and the goaltending and making sure that's all shored up might take the attention away from whether or not a guy like Monahan, Gaudreau, Lindholm, whether or not any of these guys might end up getting moved in order to fix something else on the roster. I do think Calgary is in pretty good shape, but their goaltending needs to be fixed. That's why I have them as a prime landing spot for Braden Holtby. We'll see, but that's what I think anyways. Number 9, so the last of the teams that got eliminated in the first round, and I've got St. Louis. St. Louis was dominant at times against Vancouver. Absolutely dominant at times against Vancouver. Just Vancouver had the best game I think I've seen that young core play in Game 5. And then in Game 6, they just got it done. The goaltending was better, and the overall team was, while St. Louis, I would say, was the superior team over the balance of that series, Vancouver took them out in 6. So for St. Louis, I don't think it's all doom and gloom, although if they lose Pietrangelo, it's really hard to replace him. I don't think you can. I know they've got Falk's contract. Falk was signed in part to try to protect against losing Pietrangelo, but Falk is not. He's not Pietrangelo. So that is problematic going forward. The good news, though, is that St. Louis's defense is a 6-man group, and it's really built around the idea that it's not just any one player that's the great one amongst the 6 of them. But yeah, Pietrangelo, those 52 points are hard to replace. Number 8, so the first of the teams that got eliminated in the second round, I have Boston. I have Boston because the way they got taken out by Tampa, problematic. Problematic because, and I know people are going to say, oh, well, Tuukka Rask left. Look, Rask's kid was sick, and he did what other parents would do. And, that's neither here nor there, because I don't think it was Halak that cost him the series. I think the blue line had its moments of well, let's just say the idea of Torrey Krug leaving the team, it feels a little bit easier for me after seeing the playoffs, where I thought Torrey Krug was responsible for some of those goals against, where I thought he was pinching at the wrong times. I do think that Lauzon's emergence means that it's easier to move on from Krug. I'm not as hard on Chara as a lot of other Bruins fans. I think if he wants to come back for one more year on a cheap contract, I don't think that hurts anything. But Boston does probably need to change things up. Really needs to change things up. Number 7. So again, round 2. Teams that lose round 2, I have Vancouver. Yeah, I have Vancouver in the top row ahead of Boston. I thought that Vancouver and the fight they showed in that 7-game series against Vegas, the fight their goaltending showed, was more impressive than what Boston showed. Vancouver, that young core, it feels like Vancouver's on their way up. And Boston, I really think, I know they won the President's Trophy. I know how good they were during the regular season. It feels like Boston's peaked. And I can't shake that feeling. Whereas Vancouver, it feels like the pressure is on for the first time since Benning took over. This team had better make the playoffs. And they looked great. And Demko proved that, hey, if we can't keep Markstrom, it's not the end of the world. And so as a Vancouver fan, this is the most excited I've been about the team, certainly since this channel came into existence. Most excited I've been about this team since, I'll say, the late 2000s. So I'll say 2008. Around 2008. I remember when Luongo came into Vancouver and I said, Vancouver's going to win a Stanley Cup with Luongo. That's the guy who's going to get us there. Got so close. So close, but it didn't happen. But that was the last time I got really optimistic, and I'm sort of starting to feel that way again. I've talked about it as guarded optimism all season. But for next year, I'm expecting playoffs. I expect the Canucks to at least be one of the 16 teams left standing once the regular season's done. So we'll see. Number 6. I'm not jumping off this bandwagon. I'm not. I think Philadelphia, they were the hottest team at the pause. I think the pause hurt them. They played well during the round robin, but then in the playoffs, they just never seemed to quite have it. And so Alain Vigneault, who had a very good debut with Philadelphia, now the question is, can he get 2 good years in a row out of the Flyers? I think he can. I think this is a good team. But, again, Flyers tend to have one up year and one down year. We'll see whether or not they can break that trend this season. I like Carter Hart a lot. Carter Hart's a big part of the reason why they are where they are on this board. And it is nice not to have goaltending uncertainty with Philadelphia. So, in 5th, I have Colorado. The Avs. Now, Colorado, yes. Yes, I know, yes. Injuries were huge and played a massive role in Dallas getting to where they are on this board. But, at the same time, for Colorado, it's one of those learning experiences. The learning experiences are never fun. It's not like you go to Disneyland as a learning experience. It's not like you say, that was tough. I needed a learning experience, so I was on the roller coasters. Man, what a learning experience that was. No, it's not how it works. So Colorado going through this learning experience, and I think this is one of those times where we may look back a year from now and see this as what made Colorado a champion in 2021. So if I had to pick an early champion for 2021, I would probably lean towards Colorado. They don't have cap problems right now, and they are in pretty good shape. They've got depth everywhere. As long as their goaltenders remain healthy. Remember, they had Hutchinson against Dallas and still were managing victories. So no offense to Hutchinson, but that spoke to how good Colorado really was. And of course, McKinnon had this huge point streak, and he was doing really, really well. Now we just need the rest of the team to be healthy to lift him up and to get Colorado over the hump. But I would not be surprised if they win the next Stanley Cup. Now 4th, and we're into the conference finalists. I have the Islanders. Very, very good run. Barry Trotz being the coach of the New York Islanders. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant for the New York Islanders. And he hasn't had a bad year yet in New York, and I don't anticipate him having a bad year next year either. I don't know what Lou Lamoriello's going to do in the offseason, whether or not maybe he brings Grabner back. But whatever he does with the free agency period and with the draft, it'll be fine. The Islanders are in pretty good hands with that GM-coach combination for as long as that stays together. Which means that number 3 on the board is Vegas. And for all the discussion of the goaltending, for all the discussion of why Vegas didn't, win the Stanley Cup, they're 3 years into their existence, and the fact that they were the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup at the time that this tournament started, back August 1st, says a lot about Vegas as a team, where this team's at, and the expectations going forward. So now that they've signed Robin Lehner, now that they've revealed their gold jerseys, which were every bit as Vegas-y as I thought they might be, and I knew they'd be divisive. I knew when I heard they were doing a gold third, I thought people are going to hate that, but people are also going to love it. So I anticipate that being a very big seller. And I anticipate Vegas, again, being probably the top team in the Pacific. There will be other challengers. I think the Oilers will challenge them. I think the Flames, with the right moves, could challenge them, as well as Vancouver, with the right moves in the offseason. But at this time, again, Dallas, Stanley Cup finalists, incredible run. I don't anticipate them doing it again next year, but I didn't anticipate them doing it this year, so why not? And then Tampa Bay, of course, the number 1 team, because you win the Stanley Cup, you're number 1 on the board at the end of the year. So there you go. The power rankings for the end of the 2019-2020 season, and it took us 365 plus days from when I did the preseason rankings of power rankings to get to the end of season power rankings. This was a very, very, very long season. And starting with the draft, I will be moving teams around again in anticipation for where I think things are maybe going to work out. And that's the fun of it. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support, and stop skipping to the end to complain. Just knock it off. I used to switch them all around at the end just to call out people who skip to the end to complain. There's a reason these teams are at the spot they are, and if you're going to say, Toronto should be top 5 or St. Louis should be top 3, then you don't know how I decided where these teams are on the board. You didn't watch. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.